Donald Trump is back in the White House, and he's wasting no time making headlines. One of his first big moves is slapping enormous tariffs on Canada and Mexico, two of America's top trading partners. And if there's one thing Trump loves, it's tariffs.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
At first, the White House said the tariffs would start February 1st. But according to Trump's executive order, dramatically titled Imposing Duties to Address the Flow of Illicit Drugs Across Our Northern Border, they'll officially kick in after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on February 4th, 2025. From his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump signed 3 executive orders imposing 25% tariffs on all goods from Canada and Mexico, 10% tariffs on Canadian oil exports, and 10% tariffs on Chinese goods. These tariffs are being imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law that gives the president broad authority to regulate international trade during a national emergency. This move is classic Trump. He's long argued that tariffs protect American jobs by making foreign goods more expensive, encouraging people to buy more made-in-USA products. But some experts warn that these tariffs could trigger retaliation from Canada and Mexico, making American exports more expensive abroad. In other words, what starts as a tax on imports could boomerang back and hurt U.S. businesses that sell goods overseas. Moreover, this situation goes beyond trade and tariffs. Trump has hit the ground running with a wave of executive orders. He's revoking birthright citizenship, addressing the January 6th insurrection, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, modifying Dell policies in the military, and bringing back soldiers who refused the COVID-19 vaccine. It's a flurry of policy shifts, but today, we'll zero in on the Canada tariffs. Will this bold move protect American jobs, or will it ignite a full-blown trade war? Let's break it down and see what's really at stake. In just a few days into his second term, President Trump has signed a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican imports. This includes crude oil, which is crucial for the U.S. economy. Officially, the move is being linked to border security and drug trade concerns, but there's a strong protectionist angle. Throughout his campaigns, Trump has positioned himself as a defender of American workers, and tariffs are one of his favorite tools to keep foreign competition in control. This reflects a growing distrust toward free trade in the U.S., and not just from Trump. Protectionist policies have been gaining support on both sides of the political spectrum in recent years. This is a huge shift for North American trade. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico are all part of USMCA, which is the trade deal that replaced NAFTA, meant to strengthen economic ties. But with Trump handing out tariffs, things are about to get messy. The volume of trade between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico is massive. In 2022 alone, U.S.-Canada trade was worth $909 billion, while U.S.-Mexico trade was worth $855 billion. This interconnectedness means tariffs won't just hurt one side. They cut across industries. And some sectors are in the direct line of fire. One of the biggest casualties will be automakers. A car made in Canada, Mexico, or the U.S. isn't built in one place. It's a combined effort of parts shipped across borders. Tariffs will drive up production costs, which could mean higher prices for cars and less competitiveness for U.S. manufacturers. Now let's look at the energy market, which is where it gets really interesting. Tariffs on Canadian oil could affect the energy market in a big way. The U.S. relies heavily on Canadian crude, with about 4 million barrels per day flowing in via pipelines. A 25% tariff on oil would instantly raise gas prices, which is why Trump has delayed and reduced tariffs on oil for now. Despite this, energy markets are already in turmoil. If these tariffs take effect, Canada may redirect its oil exports to Europe or Asia instead of the U.S. At the same time, Mexico, which primarily supplies crude to refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast, could seek alternative buyers. This shift could drive up fuel prices for American consumers, particularly on the East Coast. If history tells us anything, this is just the beginning. Back in 2018, Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum led to swift retaliation from Canada and Mexico. This time around, it looks like both countries are gearing up for another showdown.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country would face difficult times as a result, but promised a forceful retaliation.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has already made it clear. Canada will respond forcefully. So, what does Canada have up its sleeves? The first target is U.S. exports, especially the Florida orange juice, a direct hit to a major U.S. agricultural export. Canada has a broader list of goods that could face duties, covering up to 150 billion Canadian dollars, which is about 105 billion US dollars worth of US imports. However, before finalizing these measures, Canada plans to hold public consultations. One of Canada's greatest bargaining chips is its electricity exports to the U.S. 3 states, Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, import power from Ontario's grid. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has already issued a warning. If Trump moves forward with tariffs, Canada could halt electricity exports to these states. According to Ford, this could leave 1.5 million Americans without power. In 2024, Ontario exported 7,718 gigawatt-hours of power to Michigan. But Michigan itself produced 120,656 gigawatt-hours domestically. New York also imports Canadian power, receiving 4,149 gigawatt-hours, while producing 124,039 gigawatt-hours on its own. Minnesota is the least reliant, importing just 66 gigawatt-hours from Ontario. While cutting off these energy exports wouldn't cripple the states, it would drive up costs and disrupt supply chains. Ontario's independent electricity system operator is already discussing potential measures, though no official action has been taken yet. Canada is also leveraging on their energy as the largest supplier of crude oil to the U.S., accounting for 60% of total American imports. However, not everyone in Canada supports an energy blockade. Alberta, which exports millions of barrels of oil to the U.S., fears that halting crude shipments would harm Canada more than the U.S. On the other hand, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is taking a more measured approach, at least for now. While she hasn't announced immediate retaliatory tariffs, she's made it clear that Mexico is ready to respond. Sheinbaum warned that Trump's tariffs could wipe out 400,000 U.S. jobs and drive up prices for American consumers. "We have a Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C for whatever the U.S. decides," Sheinbaum said, without revealing specifics. Trump has linked the tariffs to border security and drug trafficking. Sheinbaum, however, argues that Mexico has already stepped up enforcement on both illegal crossings and the fentanyl trade. So, is this really about border security, or is there something more? Let's look at the numbers. Tariffs are essentially a tax, and we know who ends up paying for them, you. According to Forbes, these new tariffs would add $1,700 to the average American's tax bill, push up prices, and even reduce incomes. While Trump touts the extra revenue, the reality is that this money isn't coming from foreign governments. It's coming straight from American consumers. A separate analysis by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget projects that over the next decade, these tariffs could generate $1.5 trillion. Sounds like a big number, right? But it pales in comparison to the $5 trillion in tax cuts Trump is planning over the same period. So, in reality, these tariffs are also a way to help pay for tax cuts. Now let's talk about what really matters: prices. If we know one thing, it's that everyday costs are about to rise. Food prices, in particular, will take a hit since Canada and Mexico supply 47% of the vegetables and 42% of the processed food imported into the U.S. That means your grocery bill and even your weekend drinks are on the line. In 2023, the U.S. imported $38.5 billion worth of agricultural goods from Mexico, making it the top supplier of fresh produce. And this isn't just any food. 90% of the avocados Americans eat come straight from Mexico. So if you love guacamole, get ready to pay more. It's not just avocados. A huge chunk of agricultural products all come from Mexico too. If tariffs jack up prices, it won't be easy to find alternatives. The U.S. doesn't produce enough of these crops year-round, and shifting suppliers isn't as simple as making a phone call. That means higher prices at the supermarket. Alcohol is also on the list. The U.S. imports a massive $26 billion worth of beer, tequila, and other drinks from Mexico. What's the big picture? If these tariffs hit, you'll feel it every time you shop for groceries, grab a drink, or even buy fresh salsa at your favorite restaurant. But it's not just food and drinks that will take a hit. If you're planning to buy a car, be prepared for higher prices. Auto parts from Mexico will become more expensive, driving up costs for both new and used vehicles. And it won't stop there. Electronics and fuel will also get pricier, as both industries heavily rely on raw materials from Canada and Mexico. And the economic ripple effects don't end there. Trade tensions with Canada and Mexico could spill over into broader global disputes, with China also likely to respond. Economists at the Peterson Institute for International Economics warn that China has retaliated against tariffs in the past and may do so again. That could mean new tariffs on U.S. exports, hitting American farmers, automakers, and tech companies. To make matters worse, Trump's executive order includes a clause stating that tariffs will increase even further if Canada, Mexico, or China push back. Trump argues these tariffs will bring jobs back to the U.S.
The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
But economists say that's highly unlikely. Tariffs make U.S. goods more expensive, which reduces sales abroad. They also raise costs for manufacturers, leading to job losses instead of job creation. History shows that tariffs create collateral damage across multiple industries, and Americans already know what's coming. In a Harris Guardian poll from November, nearly 2/3 of Americans said they expected prices to rise if Trump rolled out broad tariffs. It's not just the U.S. that's feeling the pressure. China and the European Union are watching closely, and they're not likely to sit this one out. Trade wars rarely stay contained, and if Trump keeps escalating, don't be surprised if China and the EU fire back with their own tariffs. And if that happens, we're not just talking about pricier groceries or more expensive electronics. This could turn into a full-scale economic showdown. While Trump argues that these tariffs are meant to protect American interests, the reality is far more complex. Higher prices on everyday goods, job losses in industries that rely on global trade, and rising tensions with key allies could all have serious consequences for the U.S. economy. After all, history has shown us that trade wars don't end well for consumers. So, what do you think? Are these tariffs a smart move to protect American businesses, or are they the start of another costly trade war? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss updates on the biggest economic events shaping our world. See you in the next video.